Hello, and welcome to Battalion Barbell and this session review of the recent under 69 kilo class British juniors, where I was fortunate enough to be coaching an athlete that I coach, Hannah Davis. And actually, I predominantly wanted to highlight the battle that went on and the three kind of distinctly different approaches that there were between the top three ladies in this class. How I'm going to kind of go about this is I'm just going to kind of talk about the different strategies that are used and the different kind of ways that these things have gone, and kind of go through the lifts and kind of how the day unfolded as we go. I want to say that, you know, each and every approach is philosophically slightly different, and all have their own validations and their own use cases. And this is not to say that any one is better than another, but in this instance, two of the strategies worked out better than the one that are kind of going to be spoken about in this one, but that doesn't mean that's always the case. But it is a particularly interesting one in terms of like weird chips, number selection, and kind of why certain people would choose certain numbers. So where I'm going to start is I've got a little screenshot on a spreadsheet here of, this was the first time that this popped up on the live stream, so I just grabbed that, where the battle for the kind of top three here are between Sky and Hannah and Amelia, who were all actually lifting at last year's British Juniors and under 69, with Ella, who's actually now moved up to the 76 kilo class. So this is three of the top four from last year. And the lifters therein have all done really, really well. Sky had a pretty big injury around this time last year, or like kind of post juniors. So she was a bit of a wild card kind of coming into this one. Amelia, she has a really, really strong lifter, and also has the current deadlift record of 206 that she set at last year's British Juniors. And was set to be opening on 192 kilo deadlift. So let me just punch that in here, 192.5. Sky's opening deadlift is set at 160, which, you know, if you've been following Sky, that kind of tracks. That's pretty in line with, you know, with what you'd expect. And then Hannah around about 180. You know, most people, again, if they've been following Hannah's training, probably know that's probably around about right. Nothing looks particularly funky here on the surface. And the same with bench press. Sky's a really, really good bencher, opening at 100 kilos. Amelia opening at 95, and Hannah opening at 97. So all of them are pretty close. There's not a million miles between them as it currently stands. There's obviously a little bit of a difference between where Amelia is on her opening squat and Hannah is, but then that's kind of made up for on the deadlift. So it's all pretty close. So at the start of the day here, Amelia, her prognosis here is actually up 10 because she's done a 10 kilo jump, so 445, which is 7.5 behind Hannah, off of openers. Now, obviously, that doesn't really mean a whole lot to start the day. The reason that it doesn't really mean a whole lot to start the day is because, well, there's 9 lifts to go, right? People jump different numbers, they jump in different ways. Things will almost always look different by the end of the day compared to the start of the day, depending on who makes lifts and who doesn't, right? Some lifters like to take small jumps, some lifters like to take bigger jumps, and what's known as the spread, so the percentage difference across each of their lifts and across the 3 lifts, can vary massively lifter to lifter. Typically, they're somewhere around 8 to 10% most of the time. However, some it's much, much tighter. Some it can be up to kind of 15%. You know, I've seen probably slightly higher than that before in some lifters' cases where they jump, you know, absolutely huge between like deadlift 1 and deadlift 2 as an example. However, this is how it kind of all looks on paper to start off with. There are a couple of weird different notes here. Number one, Hannah has the squat chip currently at 185.5, and Amelia has the record at 206 as things currently stand. Obviously, prognosis total is kind of where it is here without the without accounting for Hannah's jump to this one. The one other thing that makes it particularly interesting is Hannah and Amelia are the same body weight. So that's number one. And that Amelia has a lot number on everybody else. So she has the higher lot number, meaning if she was to load the same weight on the bar, she would go last. So you'll see here that Sky and Amelia have loaded the same number, but Sky goes before Amelia. So from a tactical point of view, that's an advantage if you think you're going to be in a similar spot to another lifter. However, when it comes to Amelia and Hannah, with them both weighing 68 kg, if they were to total the same, it's whoever gets there first. So the reason that this is interesting in this particular instance is Amelia is a better deadlifter and has an advantage on the deadlift, in theory, in this instance. However, Hannah is a better subtotaler, right? Or at least on paper right now, as we see it, opening at 175 on the squat and opening on a bench of 97.5. That puts her a little bit in front of where Amelia is to start off with. So you'll see that there's a really, really interesting game that I kind of end up playing numerically with Hannah in case kind of Amelia can catch us, because I honestly had no idea how limitless that deadlift could be. I know that she had a good clean 206 the year before, and juniors can make alarming rates of progress very, very well. So there are a few different thoughts going in, which I'll dash down. So first past the post is the name of the rule, first past the post. The post. If two lifters weigh the same, first to the total wins. So this is like the very rare occasion that not being a deadlifter in a situation is actually advantageous. However, Amelia could just take the chip, right? So the interesting thing about where the chip is at the moment is it's 1 kilo over the record as it stands. So what it means is that you're kind of in like a middle ground, right? Because you can jump up 2.5s and the record can give you an advantage. When you're kind of caught right in between, so you're loading 1.5 kilos above the next 2.5. So in this instance, you'd be loading 206.5. It puts you really like in between the two numbers, because 207 would be the next increment up, which just puts you in front of the next person. And then you might as well just take a chip or take 209 or whatever. So there's lots of interesting intricacies to 208.5. There's lots of interesting intricacies to potential number selection with both of these girls when it comes to how the cookie crumbles. So what I'm going to do is I've uploaded everyone's opening squat, which is in here. So I'm just going to play it. And then we'll kind of see if it's, if people are making predictable jumps based off of what you see, and, how the day kind of comes together. Now, the keen-eyed among you will probably notice that Sky being a part of this conversation off of prognosis totals doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So the game that Sky and her coach Tom were playing is one of basically build the total and, take progressive jumps over the day and then kind of see where the day lands, right? Like it's a bit of a played out joke in terms of powerlifting, but go 8 for 8 and then kind of see what happens is very, very, it's kind of like it's a bit of a truism, right? It's a bit of a stereotype for a reason. Now, Amelia looks great, decent opener. I probably would jump 7.5. I think they elected to jump 10 off of this. Now, the interesting thing with Amelia being kind of in the middle is she's kind of caught in two minds, right? Like, knowing kind of the information or the revealed information that you have at this time, do you just kind of chase and try and put pressure on the person that's slightly in front of you? Or do you, defend second and then see what you can do pulling? Or, what's the plan? Like, do you try and, really squeeze early, or do you kind of wait a little bit later? Now, I think the one thing that potentially took them off guard was that Hannah jumped to pretty big after this, which was always part of our game plan, which I'll run you guys through in a second. But obviously smokes the 175, which was 9.5 kilos off of her record from last year. Extremely, extremely good squatting here from Hannah. Very, very strong, very good. And as you can see me, I'm literally already knowing what we're going to put in. So we jumped to 188 to jump to the record. Now, one thing that was on our mind is if we were going to have like a perfect day and there was nobody kind of chasing us, then we may have been tempted to swing for the Carpino. So the Carpinos were announced, and for the under 69 kilo class, it's actually 513.5 which is based off of the third place finishers, or it's a Carpino 3, so it's based off of third place finishers over the last 3 years on average, and it ends up being that number. So with that in mind, I thought to myself, well, we're going to need to take a kilo chip to potentially reach this, because that makes sense, right? That's where we're going to get it, on the squat. But also, if I get a kilo chip, it puts them in a really, really awkward position, because they're then going to have to take half a kilo over the record if they want to take it, or they're going to have to kind of jump to the next 2.5. So they're kind of like caught in between, right? So here's the thing. So the record attempts that they could go for is 206. I guess they could take 207, but 206.5. That would kind of chip in front of us. They could take the round 207. Or they could take 208.5, or I guess they could just go 210 or 211. 211. So in my mind, I was like, well, if we take a kilo chip here and we round it out, then it's really going to make sense for us to do that. So, you know, it kind of puts them in this really awkward situation where they could go 206.5, but really, what does that do? What does that achieve? They could go 207. Or they could go kind of 208.5 to kind of like nullify where we are and matches on total. But because we are, or at this point, by the time that squat and bench would be over, and again, I'm theorizing, right? I'm trying to think about long term, if this all goes how I think it's going to go, what does that kilo chip do for us? And what that kilo chip does for us is it puts us in a position where they either have to take that number in between, so they have to take the 206 or the 1.5 on the next 2.5, if that makes sense. Because we'll be in front on subtotal. So the number puts the deadlifter kind of in a bit of a bind in terms of the decisions that they need to make and the in-between kind of choices that they need to make. Because, you know, if you're reaching for something or you're chasing for something, or you're worried that somebody might catch you and you're trying to decide between 207.5, 208.5, so a kilo on top of this 2.5, or just taking 210 or 211, then, you know, you kind of have a lot of decisions, and when you're trying to weigh these 5 numbers up between each other, it creates a lot of space for a lot of mistakes potentially. So after squat 2, we had a 167, 167.5, and then Hannah with a 188. So, you know, people aren't in a bad spot here. I think everybody hits from memory. Let's scrub through and double check. So Sky, pretty sure Sky hits. So Sky's jumped 10, Amelia's jumped 10, Hannah's jumped 13. So you'll see when we get the next screen, prognosis wise, what goes on. So Sky hits, everything's good. I'm going to scrub through the rest of this session pretty quick until we get around to the deadlifts, and just kind of let everybody know where everybody's at. So Amelia hits, but it's pretty hard. Maybe 2.5, maybe 5 left. Again, as a handler, I'm not sure where I'd go. So Sky's jumped 5, and I believe Amelia also jumps 5 to stay in front of Sky and to hope that they can kind of get another kilo and kind of stay in front of that position. And presumably also to jump back in front of us in case Hannah misses her 3rd attempt squat. So 72. And then Hannah hits the 188. Dun, dun, dun. I mean, exceptional squatting from Hannah, has to be said. Extending her own British record on a second is pretty good lifting, pretty good. She had a little bit of swagger after that one too. She's pretty chuffed. So then we went with 196, which was a kilo on the record. So again, for me, in putting that number, it was Carpino 3 is in mind, and then also like creating this kind of awkward situation for Amelia should she want to pull big or pull for the win or something goes wrong, right? It's a little bit of a contingency as well as this kind of nice round Carpino number because you know, Hannah's not going to pick up a bench record and might be on a perfect day able to pick up a deadlift record, but there's every opportunity that Amelia might extend that record before we kind of get in reach of it. So it kind of leaves us in this, we have to take it now kind of thing. So Sky goes and hits. Great execution from Sky. And then Amelia, I think, missed this lift. I mean, what a fight. But ended up, not being able to turn that one over. And then Hannah, let's go through. Hannah ends up blowing this up and adding 10.5 to her own British record squat. I think it's 2-1. I think one of the side refs wasn't happy with it, but I mean, I was happy with it. That's for sure. She maybe had 2.5 more. That sticking point for her right in the middle. We'll see. Had it been, I don't know, let's just say that in some weird world we could take British records at a local meet and there was nobody competing against her. Maybe we load 198. Maybe we load and get her closer and closer and closer towards that 200. But I think this was the right number for the day, which she did great on. And I think one of the side referees pinged her for a red light. But really, really good stuff. So I'm going to pause this video now, and I'm going to... Oh, here we go. We've actually got it. So after all of that, we've got Sky at 432, Amelia at 455, and then Hannah with a decent lead of, I think it's about 18 kilos, of 473.5. So I'm going to pause this. I'm going to scrub all the way through to deadlift 1. I'll talk about what happens in the bench press, and then we'll also talk about potential changes and shifts around that end up happening during the session. So we're jumping back in here after bench press and into deadlift. Now, I will populate the bench press numbers in a second. Hannah went 2 for 3 on bench press, missing 107.5 on her third. And then we've got the deadlifts on the bar loaded here. So you'll see that Hannah's opener stayed the same at 180. However, both Sky and Amelia have moved their deadlift. So Sky's actually moved her deadlift up 10, and Amelia's moved her deadlift up 7. So when we get the pop up here on the screen, we'll be able to see it a little bit more. I'm going to scrub through and find Sky's opening deadlift. Okay, here we go. So Sky opening at 170 here. So you'll see that now her prognosis is at 450. So Sky's actually gone and hit all of her lifts. So let me just jump in and populate that real quick. So Sky ended up hitting 107.5. So she must have got 105 here. Hannah ended up missing 107, so she's only got 102. And then when Amelia pops up, I will bring that back up as well. So Sky at the moment is stitching together a pretty perfect day. She's gone 6 for 6. She's landed in a really, really good spot. And that opener looked great, crispy, easy peasy. So they've probably got a lot in there. They're probably going to jump pretty big. So you'll notice how Sky is just sort of slowly stitching together a really, really good total. And she's confidently jumped from 170 to 185, which is great. Hannah goes out and opens with a 180. So she is currently on a subtotal of 298.5. And you'll also see that her prognosis total here. So she's going to be a good way clear of Sky if she hits this. And probably securing first, although it's not guaranteed by any means with a big deadlifter like Amelia. But she's away and in front a decent amount. So that moves really, really well, really, really easily. So Hannah's feeling pretty confident too. I think I jumped 12 to 192 on this one. And I'd kind of done the maths and I was thinking to myself, well, if we hit 192, then Amelia's going to have to deadlift like 223.5 to beat us, which is a pretty big ask. However, it's not crazy, right? If somebody's opener is legit 200 and roughly a 10% spread, that takes you to 220. So I was thinking to myself, there is an outside chance that, you know, if they've got nothing to lose, she might be able to pull to 23 just based off of the maths that we're doing here. So Amelia heads out, opens at 200, huge deadlift. If they've made the sort of progress on deadlift that Hannah's made on squat in a year, it wouldn't be surprising if she's going to slap 10, 15 kilos on her deadlift. So it's a good 200. Probably not as convincing, but not bad by any means. So she comes off, and then I was kind of watching the screen thinking, okay, what are they going to... I actually watched the attempt, right? what are they going to jump to? What is this going to look like? So if we, again, just pull up that, here we go. So you'll see after all of this, so Sky, off of the opener, Amelia is in front. Sky is actually also heavier than Amelia. So there's that. And then you've got Hannah here, who is at 491. So with a big enough jump, and if Hannah misses her second, Amelia could cover ground for sure. Or even potentially, if Hannah hits a second and Amelia hits a big third, there's room for that to go peak tonk potentially. Yeah. So we'll scrub through. We'll look at Sky's second deadlift. We'll look at Hannah's second deadlift. You'll see that all these three now are kind of back to back to back, and it's all looking pretty stacked and pretty busy. So it's a case now of you kind of need to hit if you're going to be in a position to succeed. And the maths is tricky. So Amelia and her handler decided not to take a chip and just go with the round number, presuming that they maybe want to take a chip on the last one, or they think that they're well in front. So obviously I was a little bit concerned, thinking, blimey, she must have a huge pull in her if they're not even bothering taking a chip on the second, because they could take 206 point whatever it is 5, and also they're presumably not particularly worried about Sky if they're not worried about taking the chip, because obviously if they take the chip, then Sky has to go 2.5 more anyway. But they also have body weight, so because Amelia is lighter, they might just neglect the chip because of that, and maybe they're not trying to go for us, which is kind of where my head's at. You can see all these different streams of consciousness coming into play here. But so Hannah goes ahead and hits this, and it's clean and it's crispy. And I was really chuffed. And to be honest with you, we haven't really deviated from the plan much at all on this day, which I'll pull up now. We would have had a really, really big day to be hitting the Carpino. But the plan here was either 105 or 107 on third bench, between 193 and 198 on the third squat. But obviously, as we mentioned, because of how the cookie crumbled, we weren't particularly sure. And then the number we ended up hitting was actually only the second, because, to be honest, I got a bit greedy. And I thought, okay, cool, we're just going to swing for this Carpino here. So this was the original top-end plan. Now, obviously, this didn't quite transpire, and we probably should have taken 105. And then the plan was 180, 192, and then, depending on where we were, depending on pressures, etc., these were the kind of ranges that we had down. Now, with Amelia's second of 210, these all went out the window. To be completely honest with you, they went completely out the window, because we weren't going to be reaching for much more than that. Could we have taken 205? That's what we initially put in. And yeah, we could have probably pulled 205 when you see the 202 that we enter. But obviously that 210 second attempt kind of meant that we didn't have another chance to chip, which is a shame. I mean, this is a huge pull for a junior 69. Is absolutely massive. So where it gets really, really interesting is in a minute with this last round of deadlifts. So Hannah I put in 205 because that's generally what I thought was the best number for her to take, it being said that Amelia had this. There was a little part of my brain that was like, if Amelia didn't hit this, then we're going to load for the record on the on her third, but I also couldn't take any risks after Amelia hit this. So after all of this rounded out, we have going to scrub over all the way to Sky. So Sky to pull 200 will actually put her in front of Amelia, who's currently in second place, because Sky's heavier. She has to pull 2.5 more. They can't just match. So Sky pulling 200 here means, the maths is mathing in that way. Now, what I'm guessing Amelia put in 225 for is to potentially cover us. Even though they don't need 225, they only need 223. They need to do 491.5. 224 to beat us on that. But obviously, as you can see, that's a big ask. It's a big ask for anyone. So we're sort of sat in this middle ground. So Sky goes out for her third deadlift, and if she hits, will be in provisional second place, which you'll see in a second. And you can also see how the number that we had to choose for Hannah was kind of defending to an extent. It was a big ask. Great grind from Sky, locks it out. 9 for 9 day, rounds out with the 480 total. wicked. A perfect example of sort of starting light, building a total, going 9 for 9 and landing kind of somewhere. And also a decent little deceptive tactic to have an opener that was 10 kilos lighter, and then to move it up so that nobody really thinks anything of you, and then suddenly you're kind of in the race. Hannah here, if she hits it, you've got to think that it seals the day. And I think actually they didn't even wait. I think Amelia's team actually changed it before Hannah even went, because obviously if Hannah doesn't hit, they could still pull big to try and go for the win, but I think they decided to just change anyway to defend second. So they've gone up 2.5 to basically remove Sky or try and knock Sky off for second place. Hannah goes out here for 202, which is actually lifetime PR. Heaviest she's ever hit in training was 200, which was pretty good. Was pretty easy. And you'll see here that this is a pretty good pull too. Slows down a little bit, but Hannah's really come on a long way with their deadlift. At last year's juniors, we were sort of stuck in a position to swing for 200 for the position, but she pulls 202. It's a good lift. She's stoked. I was so stoked for her as well. Breaks the 500 kilo barrier, smashes it. And then Amelia here is coming out for her final pull to try and knock Sky off of second place. It's really hard being in that middle position that Amelia was kind of stuck in, where like one person's chasing you and then you're kind of chasing somebody else, because there's just naturally a lot of opportunities where you can kind of get caught out, right? Any mistake you have is going to get punished from one end or the other. And we'll see how this goes. So here it's pulling for second place to knock Sky Moore off of podium and position. So yeah, super interesting rundown. I think really interesting session in terms of both number selection and you know how things can go. And then here she is, and it's moving. Oh, it's just a tiny bit too much for the day. So really interesting. You know, this time around, Sky and your coach Tom, got to tip my hat to you guys. You executed perfectly on that day. Really built the total. Kind of came out of nowhere, really. And just unfortunate for Amelia that she didn't quite string it together. But yeah, so one lifter went 8 for 9. That's Hannah. Total 501. Probably had a little bit more in there, but obviously had to kind of defend just in case. And stitched it together, missing only her third bench. Sky going 9 for 9, totaling 100 GL as well, finishing in second. And then Amelia Martin, I think she went 6 for 9, hitting 2 squats, 2 benches, 2 deadlifts, but was kind of stuck in a bit of a hard place in terms of chasing and moving up those openers and doing that stuff to try and be in range, and it didn't quite pay off on that day. So that's not to say that, you know, Sky's approach or Amelia's approach is right or wrong. It's just to sort of say that there are different ways to skin this cat, and it was really interesting from a perspective of Sky kind of came out of nowhere and stitched together a really big day, and as I mentioned, had a bit more of a larger spread, should we say, between the 170 opener and finishing at 200, versus Amelia's spread was a lot narrower. She had a 10 kilo spread on her squat, she had a 5 kilo spread on her bench, she had a 10 kilo spread on her deadlift. So what her openers looked like at the start of the day versus where she actually finished was actually relatively close together compared to the other two girls. Just some food for thought, I suppose, and an interesting session to break down and be a part of. Huge congratulations to Hannah, and great lifting from everyone involved.